Welcome to Rice TVX. On today's show, I am once again joined by Jordan from Waters Above. I will include a link down below in the video description and above for the playlist that includes his 2 previous appearances. Today, we're going to get a Waters Above perspective on 2023, and we're also going to be talking about how lunar and solar cycles affect not only the cryptocurrency markets, but traditional markets as well. Before we get into it, make sure you visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX and Rice Against the Grain content. You will also find links to all of my various channels as well as my social media. Make sure you're following both of my YouTube channels, Rice TVX as well as Rice Against the Grain. And due to censorship, make sure you follow me on other alternative platforms such as Rumble and Odyssey, where I do post up exclusive content. If you want to support Rice TVX, be sure to check out and join my Patreon channel, where you will get early access to my videos with no ads, unedited. You will also get exclusive content and more. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. Okay, joining me on today's show as a returning guest, I am joined by Jordan from Waters Above. I will include a playlist down below for his 2 previous appearances, and I definitely encourage you to check those interviews out because you'll learn more about what Waters Above is all about and how Jordan combines Gematria, astrology, numerology with technical analysis. So Jordan, welcome back to the channel. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing better every day. Thank you for having me back on. Really excited to join you.
And I'm always looking forward to the conversation. I mean, we had a pretty decent conversation before we started playing a little catch up. So I want to wish you a happy new year, man.
Yeah, you as well. You and your community. I'm looking forward to this new year, leaving the old energy behind us and just focusing on moving forward.
Truly. And again, man, I really thoroughly enjoy our conversations. Another thing that we had mentioned that we would like to do is a conversation kind of outside of cryptocurrency. So I'll be bringing you on my other channel, Rice Against the Grain, soon, and we'll surprise people about what that'll be all about. But it'll be a deeper dive into some of the things that you study and look into. But I'm really excited to kind of catch up with you about cryptocurrency. And last time we talked, we had just saw the beginning of the FTX collapse. We had talked about how the moon cycles kind of came into play with that situation. Now, remind me, was that just a full moon that when the Terra Luna crash took place and the FTX fall began, or was it an eclipse?
Yeah, so it was an eclipse. So Terra Luna collapsed on a lunar eclipse, and the FTT token collapse and the FTX ritual happened on a lunar eclipse as well.
Okay.
So back-to-back lunar eclipses, back-to-back crashes, and very popular stories to kind of flood the world with a narrative, very purposely done and executed exactly at that time. I also thought it was amazing how the arrest of Sam Bankman-Fried happened 33 days after the lunar eclipse.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, just another number to play around with. But yeah, anyways.
I am going to do a video because the last video I did on Sam Bankman-Fried was when he got arrested. And at that point, I was just really burnt out on Sam Bankman-Fried. I was keeping up with what was going on, but I definitely need to do an update video, kind of what happened since the arrest and where we are now, because it actually looks like he got released on potentially a what they call a public reconnaissance bond, which is basically a promise to appear. Because I don't think there was $250 million put up. There was a little bit of collateral with his parents' house, but that's another subject. So I definitely encourage people to check out, like I said, our previous conversations. With the second one, we got into lunar and solar cycles, and we're going to kind of do a deeper dive into that. I'm going to have links down below for your website, for your YouTube channel, and also we'll share your Patreon here towards the end of the video. It looks like you still right now got 10% off on your first order. Is that still active?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's at watersabove.com. And I appreciate you sharing that with everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to let people know how they can learn from you, obviously. So people can check out watersabove.com, and you have a mastermind course, your expansion mastermind, advanced trading course, exit strategy blueprint. And I know you've got some other things that you're working on as well that you've talked to me about. And then I'll also have a link for your channel. And this is kind of where I want to begin the conversation, because as I was telling you before we started recording, is I haven't had a chance to watch your last two videos. And I'd really like to kind of get your thoughts. You know, we are recording on January the 4th, 2023. I'll have this video out tomorrow on the 5th, and we have a full moon coming on the 6th. So I'd like to kind of get your thoughts just from these videos, like what you think 2023 is going to look like for the world of cryptocurrency, and I guess even finance as well, because it is a factor that kind of plays in with cryptocurrency and something you definitely pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last two videos were definitely heavily focused on transitioning into this 2023 year. And we know that it's typical at the end of the year, we have a little bit of a sell off for tax loss harvesting or whatever purposes. But we also just have a lot of people buying a ton of stuff. You know, Q4 is a very heavy consumerist, materialist holiday. So you have people that might be in the selling, just to get some funds to be able to pay for Christmas presents or whatever's going on, you know. But ultimately, what I was focusing on is transitioning into this upcoming full moon, which you just brought up a moment ago. That's on January 6th. And I've also been sharing a little bit of a forward outlook onto the February full moon, which is more in the conversation of the stock market. I was doing a lot of technical analysis on the stock market. So looking at the indices, the Dow Jones, NASDAQ, S&P, and it seems as if we have about like these 60-day cycles where we tend to bottom out into every other full moon, and then we have a rebound, and then again we take another leg down. And that's been very cyclical and obvious if you look especially at like the S&P 500 chart. So that's telling me that if I was to make the last measured low over 60 days or just two full moons straight, it would put us into February. And I've been very adamant in my work, and I talked about it a lot in those last two videos, how I see a relief rally for the market through the month of March and April. So this aligns very nicely with the analysis that I have with the stock market regarding lows into February and recovery for March and April.
Okay. I'm going to try to digest all of that. So we have a full moon coming up, and when this comes out for people publicly, the following day, but 2 days from now. What kind of effect do full moons generally have on the markets that you see from your studying and your research of this subject?
Totally. So it's typically a 5-day window of time. So 5 days before up to 5 days after, that's kind of like the time where we get what's considered to be a micro cycle low. And one thing I really want to reiterate, and even people that are newer to my channel that are just kind of stumbling upon my work for the first time and they hear me talk about this so-called 5-day window, I want people to know that after we have an eclipse, it could take some time for these lunar cycle energies to just relax a little bit, because we're talking about a ton of market cap that has left this market just from the FTX collapse. So people need to know, like, the volatility right now is not going to be as noticeable until we get back to the next eclipse. Right now, we just watched two back-to-back huge dumps in liquidity. I mean, I believe the last time I checked the statistics, it was $1 trillion has left the cryptocurrency market since the prior all-time highs. So when we're looking at this 5-day window, some people take it like way too literally and they get so specific with it. And I'm just trying to give you this so that you could look month by month what to expect during the month. So if it's 6 days or 10 days, it starts to become minutia. The whole point here is that eclipses play a big role in all of this. When we get through an eclipse, if we're going to have a massive shakeout in the market, don't anticipate, crazy, huge moves around these new moons and full moons. So with that being said, The one thing that I think is really interesting is that we are starting off this year with a Friday the 13th. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have January 6th is our full moon. And if you take us about 5 days, a little bit more into that window, we will have a Friday the 13th. And we all know these Friday the 13th are very important in markets. And if you're unaware, you could start to track back some big moments. But I'll just point out a recent moment. It was the March 12th into March 13th of 2020 crash. We all know what that was. And that was the lowest we've seen Bitcoin since. And a lot of these altcoins went to new lower lows in their cycle. So when this pandemic
On
started,
Friday the
we
13th.
saw exactly. So we saw the big crash happen on the 12th. But if we look at the 13th, that was the day that Bitcoin and a lot of altcoins wicked down to their absolute lowest price before what we could call now a V-shaped recovery. And that was a Friday the 13th. So it plays a big role. And I just want people to know that this year of 2023 and where we're situated being 1 year after the Shemitah, which you talked about in views, so people could go back and watch those. But the year after this 7-year cycle event, you want to look for these key, moments such as eclipses. We have these Friday the 13th, and we have Rosh Hashanah. We have some other Hebrew holidays to consider. So we could get into that further into the interview, but just to get people primed and ready for the first month of this year, we do have a Friday the 13th, and I'm considering that heavily in my analysis on top of the idea of somewhat of a bearish energy around this full moon.
Well, it makes sense. Because so there was an announcement, because I know you don't keep up with all the traditional news necessarily with cryptocurrency, because I think it probably messes up some of the stuff that you're doing, looking at what you're doing.
Yeah.
But Gemini, the Winklevoss twins, I call them the Winklevi, because there's plural Winklevoss. But the Winklevi, they're having an issue with Genesis lending, because that was who was doing the earn program through Genesis with their credit card and other different mechanisms.
Yeah.
Genesis is owned by Digital Currency Group, and one of the Winklevi put something together on Twitter. I'll see if I can pull it up while I'm talking to you, and was basically saying to Barry Silbert that, and it was like an open letter, like you need to give us the money that was owed to. I'm paraphrasing this. You need to give the money that was owed to us by the date that they brought up was the 8th, which is interesting when you think about the full moon, and then you think about the Friday.
There you go.
Friday the 13th, because that will be right in between the two.
Yep.
So let me see.
Yeah, this is quite an interesting month. If we look at Bitcoin particularly, we're going to see that Bitcoin tends to have its all-time highs in the cycle and all-time lows in the cycle all around this pivot time frame. And one other thing to mention, brother, is that January 9th will be the 14th anniversary since the official release of Bitcoin. So January 9th of 2000, I think it's 2009, I believe.
Yep.
I believe it's 2009. I'm glad I remembered that. I'm in the midst of doing a decode actually, where I was just kind of taking some notes. But anyways, yeah, just for everyone to be reminded that this will be the 14th anniversary of Bitcoin's initial release. And that number 14 is really powerful in my work. So if you're brand new to my work, you probably will kind of be shocked by how important that number is. It's been coming up a lot over the past 2 years, and it's actually one of the numbers that I use to, and I don't like using this word lightly, but I sort of used it to predict who would win the Super Bowl in the last Super Bowl. Anyways, I do encourage people to consider that, the fact that we have the full moon in a couple days, probably a day after you put this interview up, then followed, we have that 14th anniversary of Bitcoin's initial release. The day before that is what you just exposed. And then a couple days after, we're moving into Friday the 13th. So this energy into the first month of the year is pretty obvious to me that we're gonna have some volatility perhaps, but I don't really think it's going to be anything as insane as what we've already experienced, comparatively to Terra Luna or FTT. But I am considering during this year there to be several events that are similar to what happened with Sam Bankman-Fried. I think we're going to have multiple events when we're talking about cryptocurrency and even the traditional markets. As we pivoted out of the year 2022, we already started to hear about all these CBDCs and kind of, that kind of conversation is entering the arena. For me, that's not by accident. It's because we're in the Jubilee year, and this is the type of shit they do. Just like if we go back 50 years ago, we had Nixon shock, which led to what happened with 1973 to 1975 with that recession. So here we are 50 years later. These 50-year cycles are something that people definitely have to become aware of if they want to be participants in markets.
Yeah, when you mentioned the ninth, you said the ninth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you mentioned the ninth, I found that interesting because a lot of people don't realize that it was January 3rd was the day that the Bitcoin network, because I put a video out last night. It's the day the Bitcoin network was launched and the creation of the Genesis block or block 0. And it was bootstrapped. I don't even think it was actually mined. And I think so block 1 was mined 6 days later. And I believe the second block was mined within a 2 or 3 minute interval. The third block was mined within a 7-minute interval. And then I think somewhere around like the 12th is when Hal Finney might have started mining as well. So that's interesting to kind of just fit into the picture as well, kind of in the middle of all of that stuff. And the letter was from Cameron Winklevoss, and it was going to Barry Silbert, who's this, the CEO of in charge of Digital Currency Group. And the last part of it is, to that end, and for the final time, we are asking you to publicly commit to working together to solve this problem by January 8th, 2023. And we remain ready and willing to work with you, but time is running out. And he's just basically talking about getting the funds that was to be returned to them. So it's interesting how that works out with the timing. So the full moon on the 6th, the 8th deal, then we're talking about the 9th for the anniversary of block 1, and then we have Friday the 13th. And that's all going to be like a week
in that
time
full moon
period,
energy.
starting on the 6th. Yeah. That'll be interesting. I wonder if this will be our, like, as far as what you're seeing from a technical analysis perspective, adding in the Gematria and numerology and astrology. Do you kind of have a time frame for when we will hit a bottom in the cryptocurrency and or traditional markets?
So I'll start with cryptocurrency. I think it's very soon, if not this upcoming full moon. I believe we should be out of it. Now, I'm speaking on Bitcoin. Okay. The problem here is these altcoins, their energy is done. So when Bitcoin moves closer to solar cycle, which is going to be starting on April 20th, and we'll talk about that later. But when we're in this energy right now, Bitcoin is going to steal a lot of dominance from all these altcoins. And we're going to see altcoins make dramatic moves lower, and then they're going to pivot up really quickly, like what we just saw with Solana. Solana just took a huge dump down to like $8. On some exchanges a little bit lower than 8, but then we get a big buyback. FTT token actually just did this, where FTT kind of made it down to like, I don't know, about 70 cents, and then it pivoted back up. Now it's about $1. We're going to see a lot of that shit going on, but Bitcoin is really going to steal the show. I think Ethereum is going to become much more mature in this cycle as well. So this means that Bitcoin bottoming out might not really correlate necessarily with the rest of the other altcoins. And I want to be very clear in that, because a lot of people don't even follow Bitcoin. Most people are interested in like maybe just XRP or the ISO 222 tokens or Hex or one particular community that gets focused on one particular altcoin. So what I'm speaking on right now, and if anyone was to look back into my work over the past half a year, you'll see that I was very adamant about December into January, us continuing lower on altcoins. And that's exactly what happened. As we got to the end of December, at the end of the year, we started seeing Solana drop, Hex drop. We saw Stellar Lumens drop. I mean, a lot of HBAR, I could keep going. A lot of shit just kept making another leg lower. And this is the time frame that we saw it back in 2018. It was the same exact thing. As we got to the end of Q4 and the start of Q1, there was that similar sort of pivot. And I rather put my energy into talking about some of those coins that I just mentioned because they did exist in the last cycle. I haven't been giving much energy to shit that was just launched in 2020 or 2021
Right.
because that got lucky by just being introduced at the right time and having all that liquidity, all the stable coins that were being minted. So people need to know that you want to play very safe right now. And when Waters Above says that the bottom's almost in, he's really just talking about the blue chips. And I know that language and that lingo is kind of tied back into stocks, but I'll finish off on this, okay? Back when Amazon crashed in the dot-com bubble, Amazon didn't have nearly the market cap that Bitcoin was working with on this recent all-time high. But when Amazon made that huge correction down into the depths of like 2001, we were hearing across the board everyone saying this is the end, this company is useless, it's scam, this, that, and the third. It dropped to 30 cents, and then look at what happened. Look
We're
at
talking
all
about
those
the
years later.
dot-com bubble, right?
We're talking about the dot-com bubble, and I think it's
Right.
important that we consider that that's the closest cycle that we could possibly analyze as sophisticated technical analysts if we're trying to look at asset classes. That's the best we can do. So I would consider Amazon almost like a comparative to VeChain or Theta at that time. Like if we were to really look at what we're talking about versus market cap drop. So
Okay.
I'm being open-minded to the idea here that if we can watch that kind of shit happen with Amazon, like think about the future of the economic ecosystem that has been written down for us. We know that it's blockchain as the basis of it. Blockchain is the base layer of this incoming financial system, whatever it ends up being for the states or country that you live in. So I'm really just saying all this because I want people to be very conservative in their investment thesis at this time. And if you're thinking of buying into cryptos, please be considerate of what Bitcoin will do over the next 6 months to 1 year in comparison to the so-called favorite altcoin you have, because it might not work the way you think it does. I was showing in my Red Pill podcast that I do over on Patreon how when we look at the recovery from the bottom of 2018 on Bitcoin to this automatic rally that I've been talking about, somewhat of a relief rally, which went into June of about 2019, I believe. You saw a 300% gain in Bitcoin and an identical like 320% gain in ETH. So when Bitcoin makes these recoveries at this stage in the cycle, it does not make altcoins have those crazy 10x's or any of that shit. It's a different environment, guys. So Bitcoin is much, much safer in this stage of the bull run right now than gambling on whatever speculative altcoin that you think is going to do some significant recovery. There's isolated projects, of course, but I just want people to be aware of that. When
No, I agree.
Bitcoin makes when Bitcoin makes a 300% recovery, and we're seeing an identical recovery in ETH, but we watched Bitcoin lose 85% of its value, and ETH lost 95% of its value before that recovery. So what was the safer play? What was the thing you should have been paying more attention to? What broke to a new all-time high after all of that first? Bitcoin. So I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I'm sharing this because it's the facts in the chart from prior cycles. And this is not
Yeah.
the
Well,
environment to gamble your life savings away on speculative altcoins.
and that I would agree with. The hex thing, there was some SEC charges brought up against influencers and some people that were promoting hex, but not necessarily as far. Like, there's nothing that I know of with Richard
Oh,
Hart at
really?
this moment. But the SEC is, it's kind of like uncertain territory. Like what you're saying, Bitcoin has pretty much been defined as a commodity. Everybody agrees on that as far as a government perspective. I look at it as currency, but they call it a commodity, so it's not going to be listed as a security, so it's safe. Now, when regulation comes through, it's very possible that coins that followed Bitcoin's lead will also be in that same position, like Litecoin. There was no ICO. It was a fair launch using the open source code of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin's a commodity, then Litecoin should be a commodity. So we might actually see a comeback of some of these older projects because of them being able to stay around for so long and be able to not be listed as a security potentially. So then we also have, I think it just got frozen, but there was potential Alameda wallets over the past few weeks dumping Ethereum, Ethereum based tokens. So there's a lot of kind of stuff that's kind of interplayed with what you mentioned, just kind of adding in some like real world input. Now,
Yep.
you're talking about potentially a bottom for Bitcoin in this bear cycle within the next week and a half is kind of what you're speculating.
Yeah, and when we think of a bottom, we can't really we can't really confirm bottom until we technically break the next high in the structure. So as of being in the lows, like we're talking the language of catching a falling knife. So I just want to let
Well,
people know that you can't confirm bottom until you start to see some recovery. But
I
yes,
mean
in my
lower than where like do you see us hitting lower than like the
oh,
15.5 price range that we've hit? When that's what I mean bottom. Like so far the
okay.
bottom that we've seen is price range has been like around 15.5, 15.7, somewhere around
Great,
there.
great question. If we're going to break lower, I anticipate it's going to happen within the next 30 days. And
Okay.
see, if we're going to start to see recovery, it's probably going to happen before June. And what I mean by recovery, I'm not talking about price discovery to the upside. I'm just saying that we probably are going to have a repeat of this phase. If you go back to the charts of like December 2018 to the summertime 2019, we had an incredible rally. I don't think it's going to be as extreme in this cycle, but I do see a similar thing playing out because this comes back to Wyckoff method. Richard Wyckoff was alive over 100 years ago, and this method of accumulation and reaccumulation cycles has not changed even with the introduction of cryptocurrency. You could do the same method on tech stocks. So it's a really brilliant method, and it simplifies a lot of our desire to be emotional about concepts like Bitcoin's going to go to zero or whatever. We could look at things, zoom out, and actually analyze it in a more sophisticated fashion. So if we're thinking of a lower low, it's most likely either in already, like it's already in for Bitcoin, and when we look at a possibility of going lower, I really don't see it happening after the February 7th time frame. Altcoins, though, different discussion. So one thing that I should answer that I didn't get around to before was you asked me about the stock market bottom. Now, I think we should consider prior Shemitah cycles, like prior iterations of this 7-year cycle and prior collapses or market crashes. What I've studied and see is the pattern here. We get about 1 year after the end of the Shemitah, and that is when we hit bottom. So the Shemitah cycle ends on the Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. 1 year after would be the next Rosh Hashanah, and that's going to be September 15th through 17th. And specifically, it's the eclipse that will follow that Hebrew New Year. So this tells me that by October, I'll give a window, pretty much October of next year, we should see the stock market lower than what it is now. It should not be recovered at all because stock market cycles take much longer to drop. They take much longer to recover. By that time, Bitcoin and cryptos could actually be rejected off of this so-called relief rally that I was telling you about. And we'll come back. I definitely think even if we were to see like a 30 to 35K Bitcoin in a recovery phase, I think we'll still come back to 20K or maybe even drop a little bit lower. Now, altcoins can really get thrashed around that time. So we got to see. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because we still have the SEC case going on with XRP. We still have all this bullshit going on right now with SBF and potential other crypto exchanges kind of becoming insolvent. So I don't want to get super, super far ahead, but I'll just let people know. I think that crypto is in its process of the finality of its bottom, whilst the stock market still has so much to go. Like I'm seeing below $70 Tesla. Like I've been doing a little bit of analysis on some of the tech stocks and they have so much to give up. Like, oh my goodness, Amazon has so much to give up. It was
Yeah.
just monumental printing in the year of 2020. All of that, like historic, right? The most money printing in a single year that was in the whole entirety of the Federal Reserve System going back to 1913. So
Yeah.
fuck,
Crazy.
right? Like, so people see this bull run and they zoom out of this chart. If they're seeing what I'm seeing, it's a lot more money that needs to get out of this market, and it's going to go it's going to have to go somewhere else. So I predict a pivot of this liquidity out of the speculative shit tech stocks, these ghost corporations, and it's going to go somewhere. And where I think it will be going is into crypto, the future. Just like it did before the dot-com bubble. Things left the prior asset class and they go into the new.
I would definitely love to see that. And we've got a lot of interesting things going to be happening this year. So we've kind of talked about what's going to be taking place potentially in the next few weeks. You mentioned the February full moon. You said that that would have more of an effect on the traditional stock markets from your analysis.
Yeah, and if it has an effect on the stock market, then it will affect Bitcoin. And this is why I'm telling people I don't
Generally.
anticipate a noticeable relief rally in the market until March. In
Okay.
for the whole market, including the stock market.
Well, where that could interplay is the next FOMC meeting with the Federal Reserve is February 1st and 2nd. They'll be giving information on the 2nd as to what the rate hike will be. A lot of people are expecting a 50 basis rate hike. And then people are thinking that not necessarily pivoting, but maybe come March, there won't be another rate hike. It may just stay the same. I don't see them reducing anything. I don't see them reversing course. But as long as that's kind of what it looks like, it might be the last one for the next few months, potentially based off of what we're going to get from yeah. So that I could see where the rally would pick up back again in March.
And then you'll probably have a traditional sell in May, walk away moment. And then we have that lunar eclipse on May 5th or May. Yeah, it's right around that time frame. So for me,
I wrote this down because we have the April 19th or 20th, depending on where you're at in the world, but where we're going to be at 420, the total eclipse of the sun, a solar eclipse. And then I'm not is it a total eclipse on the 13th of October as well?
No, it's a penumbral eclipse. It's not that important, but it does matter. But I'm looking at this.
The next lunar eclipse is May 5th, 2023. And then after that, what is October 26th?
Yeah, that's going to be big. October 14th is a solar eclipse. That one I think is going to be noticeable in the stock market.
October 13th or 14th?
14th. It's going to be noticeable in the stock market. And guess what? October 13th is a Friday the 13th. So
are you serious?
There you go. Like October 13th through 14th with that eclipse mixed with, the fact that we have that that particular date.
But that's beautiful. A penumbral eclipse, you said?
Oh no, that's the one in May that you asked about before.
The one in May?
Here's the thing for people, just to simplify. Like it's really the focus on this eclipse that's coming up into April 20th. And then if people really want to look far ahead for how this can all shake out, it's October. The whole month of October is what we should anticipate for more bearish. October. And that October is a month historically of some of your biggest market crashes of all time. One other thing to mention is the Bitcoin halving is in the year 2024. And we've seen over and over again that between your absolute low in the cycle and a rejection after a relief rally, which I'm anticipating will happen in the year 2023, we are still in accumulation territory with the crypto market until we get past the Bitcoin halving, which is a beautiful thing. It's really beautiful. Like if you think about it as an investor who's holding on to projects right now, and I say this, to all people who are listening, this is an opportunity to de-risk a little bit before the market probably takes another, potentially another leg lower for the altcoins at least. And it's all buying opportunities. And crypto's nice because the buying opportunity cycle is much, much shorter than like a stock market cycle. The stock market takes some time. I don't think we're going to see a return of all-time highs in the stock market for a while, man. Because that amount of money that was injected into that market was silly.
It would depend on when the Fed reverses course. I think when the Fed reverses course, we're going to see everything kind of take off, and that will probably be like the last big hoorah.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because at some point, the Federal Reserve is going to have to reverse because we're going to be in a traditional recession or depression. I pulled up some information for the block reward halving for when the halving event takes place. I'll include this link down below, but it's roughly estimated on when the blocks are mined, and it's supposed to be every 10 minutes, but it's not always precise at 10 minutes. So they can't really say specifically. They can only roundabouts, and the closer we get to the halving event. So that's about, I don't know, a year and 4 months off, something like that, just off the top of my head.
The way that I describe it to people, is that the Bitcoin halving is the last opportunity to buy heavily discounted speculative bullshit. Because Bitcoin might be low, but I guarantee you, if you're comparing where the rest of the altcoins will be, it's your last chance. And it's like monkeys playing darts. You could just put money into fucking anything and it will go up. Like, as long as Bitcoin breaks into price discovery, you're going to see 10x's, 20x's. I don't think we're going to see as dramatic of a market in the next turn, but we also have to see, because we're talking about, we're in a world of technology and the information age, and shit develops quick right now, bro. So just between the start of 2024 and the Bitcoin halving, just that 5-month period, you could have an immense amount of change in social climate and the way that we interact with each other. I mean, we're already seeing, since the end of the pandemic, a lot of those things that changed during that 2 years has stayed. I'm obviously not wearing masks and stuff like that, but I mean, the QR codes at the restaurants and the conversation around crypto has become much more popular. The idea of digital currencies being integrated into our world is just much more of a standard thing. It's not like taboo or weird or as much of a secret. Now it's just everyone's aware. And the more you get these like Logan Pauls and these big influencers talking about NFTs and all that, it's just going to further push the popularity of the asset class. Maybe not in the way that's best for the investor, but in a way that kind of just gets it to be known.
That makes sense. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the February full moon, how it affects stock markets, and usually what affects stock is going to, bottom line, generally affect cryptocurrency. We talked about a potential relief rally in March, which makes sense based off what we talked about with the Federal Reserve and then what we're seeing kind of based off your research. Now coming into April, we've been mentioning this total eclipse of the sun taking place in the United States on 4/20, April 20th, 2023. So you kind of given us a little bit of an impression of what effect the moon has on markets, specifically crypto and stocks, traditional markets. What kind of effect does, and I know we touched on this, but now we have a total, before we were focusing on the lunar eclipse, I want to kind of focus on, in the last video, I want to focus now on the solar eclipse. So what kind of effects does the sun have on markets in general in a generic way? And what is significant about this specific lunar eclipse taking place on April 20th?
Yeah. So when we move into this eclipse on April 20th, we're going to enter a solar cycle. And what this means is, when we enter this solar cycle, that all the lunar eclipses become weaker. Okay. Right now, we're in a phase where lunar eclipses are very strong. And this is obvious now because we just watched 2 back-to-back lunar eclipses take a huge toll on the market cap of cryptocurrency. So that's undeniable. Like, I don't care what no one can debate this anymore. These past 2 eclipses proved a theory that I've been sharing over the past 2 years. So now when we look at the transition into solar phase energy, you can see that all cryptocurrency bull runs, well, I'll just talk about Bitcoin because that's the best data that we have. When we move into a solar cycle where the lunar eclipses become weaker, that is where we have all of our bull runs. That's where we have all of these relief rallies that I'm talking about. It's where the market is bullish. And now this makes a lot of sense because Bitcoin is like literally the sun of the entire cryptocurrency market. When Bitcoin goes low, everything else goes low. When Bitcoin enters price discovery, everything else enters price discovery. When Bitcoin crashes, everything crashes, etc. It's never any other way. So I mean, it's.
So why do you see a relief in March and not April then?
Well, that's what I said. We'll see it happening by March, and then it should move into the April eclipse.
Okay, so we should see it. Okay, that makes
The,
sense. I was just trying to get some clarification on that, since that we're talking like a potential of 30 days. You know, if we're looking at the 20th of March to the 20th of April,
yeah,
just kind of giving
absolutely.
just some perspective.
And for sure. And one thing to let people know, if we go back to 2019, we pivoted into a solar cycle and Bitcoin moved up into July and we had a solar eclipse on July 2nd. We moved up right into that eclipse. We went a little bit further, which is normal. But if you look at the chart on Bitcoin, we topped out on that relief rally on June 26th. Like we literally just got sucked into
Wow.
that eclipse. And then we looked that there was a short rejection down into July 2nd, which was the date of the actual eclipse. And then we moved a little bit up into July 10th. And then it just was downhill from there. We entered a downtrend. Um, so this analysis that I'm sharing, it's not just created out of thin air. Like I'm actually using what happens really with the astrology side of things and the pattern that seems to be forming based on Bitcoin's price action. So we have been in lunar phase now for quite some time, actually, back since May of 2021. And if you look at May of 2021, when we had that big move to the downside, that was the end of alt season. We saw some isolated coins move up with Bitcoin at the end of 2021, but ultimately most of them were already in a downtrend. Okay. So this is really important for people to see that the end of alt season was moving into the start of the lunar phase, but we only had alt season during solar phase. So this again is why I'm thinking, or why I'm utilizing this analysis, and I'm holding it as such an important part of my analysis, because I'm seeing that we're at the tail end of this energy right now and we're moving into solar phase. Very soon, actually, like seriously, it's only in
When
April.
As I was going to ask you, does it begin with the eclipse or kind of before that?
Yes, it'll begin on April 20th and then it'll last all the way until, damn, I mean, several years.
It will be in a several year solar cycle.
Yeah, we'll be in a solar cycle until like 2025.
So then all
Which
the
aligns really nicely with our typical 4-year cycle. Like if you think about it, 2025 at the start will be sort of the typical 4-year run that we see with Bitcoin every time. And what I'm sharing with the world right now, and in my videos, is that the 4-year cycle is probably something to do with the sun and moon. And is it weird that Bitcoin's halving event is just so perfectly like nestled into this? I don't think it's by accident, because I think that the people who invented the stock market are astrologers. Like you go back to quotes from people who were investors, 100 fucking years ago. They're using astrologers, professional astrologers, to determine market activity. And even in real life, you could ask any doctor, any police officer, like what's going on a full moon? It's when you have the most robberies, the most people going to jail, staying the night in a jail cell, the most people being rushed to an emergency room. At prisons, it's the higher likelihood of inmates getting into fights. This isn't like woo woo. This is real
No,
shit.
I mean, yeah, we've talked about how obviously it affects the ocean, the tides. It affects how animals act. Uh,
Yep.
it's it's I mean, it's obviously when we're in tune with nature. I mean, one of the coolest things that when I first got involved in crypto and was just learning a little bit about trading and trying to get some things about technical analysis was the Fibonacci, how it
Yeah.
perfectly aligns and how there's fractalizations, which kind of comes into the sacred geometry. So sacred geometry to me is almost written in the stars in a lot of ways. And
Yep.
that's where I can see that connection. That's why I find a lot of value in these conversations where a lot of crypto people don't even want to
They
dive into
disregard
this
it.
esoteric. Yeah, they just don't even want
Yeah.
to take it any serious. Like um there's a girl by the name of Maren Altman. She is a astrologer and she does cover
Hmm.
cryptocurrency, but she doesn't do it in a way that you do it. And even some content creators don't necessarily take her 100% seriously, even
Hmm.
though a good friend of mine, Madi Greenspan, who has a company called Quantum Economics. He's Israeli based, and he used
Yep.
to work for eToro, and he has Quantum Economics, which is basically a service that explains to people like kind of trends, things happening from a lot of different perspectives. So he has a lot of different advisors, and he actually has
Hmm.
Marin as one of his advisors because he is also somebody who I've talked to about the Shemitah, being that he
Yep.
is Jewish, lives in Israel. He's got
Hmm.
a different perspective on these kind of things too. So it's really powerful to think how all that interacts. So
100%. And I mean, and on the other side too, we have every time we see a Bitcoin all-time high, it's within 48 hours of a new moon.
the Bitcoin highs are within 48 hours of a new moon.
Yeah, most of the time
Not
on
every
the
new
actual
moon.
new moon. No, the all-time highs that we get that we've been getting every cycle, they're all happening on new moons.
So like when we hit the 65-ish range, it was within a 2-day period of a new moon, and when we hit 69-ish, it was within a 2-day period of a new moon, or right on the new moon.
So with the last cycle, we were within a couple days of the new moon. If we go back to the cycle, well, I mean the first top, because we have kind of a confusing recent double top situation that we're talking about.
Yeah.
April of 2021, it was literally on the day of the new moon. If we go back to the cycle of 2017, where we hit the top at 2017, December 17th, it was within 24 hours of the new moon. If we go back to the cycle of 2013, 2014, it was within literally the day of the new moon. You could just keep going.
Wow.
It's every
That's
time.
pretty bizarre. That's crazy how that lines up. One thing that you also mentioned that I was remembering is that you said during solar cycles that the full moons don't have as much of an impact or effect. How does that work with lunar eclipses? Because we have something coming up on May 5th and then something coming up on October 26th. What's the difference between those two?
So basically, when we move into solar cycle, which will be April 20th, we're going to see that the lunar eclipses are less dramatic and they're weaker. I think that's the best
Okay.
way to put it. They're just weaker. Right now, they're very strong. So it's easy to predict. Every lunar eclipse that we've had has been really, really dramatic in what it's done to the price action of the markets. But
Especially in a lunar cycle. But being in a
in a
solar cycle.
exactly.
Okay.
So when we move into a solar cycle, we get stronger solar eclipses. So this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated for people, because now we have to get into like mythology, and we have to get into like every project is tied back to certain things. So if you take every single crypto, like let's just take the top 50, right? And if you were to lay out all their charts, you're going to see that most of the dramatic swings are absolutely in alignment with Bitcoin. But if we look at like the XRP chart versus like the Ethereum chart, we're going to see that Ethereum entered price discovery and actually went on to an all-time high in even November. We saw that all-time high for ETH that followed Bitcoin, went right up, peaked a little bit higher, and it came down right with Bitcoin. But XRP didn't do that. XRP just continued to go down. Okay. And now people they're like, oh, that's a discrepancy. But if you follow my work, you're going to learn why there's a difference. And it's because the mythology plays a big role in all of this. And it would be a lot to get into in this conversation, but I'm just letting people know that this is a way of taking the base foundation of what I'm teaching with the idea of the lunar cycles, and then also with this bigger macro idea of lunar phase and solar phase and the eclipses. And now we could go even deeper, where we have like each project starts to be correlated with a specific thing. And anyone who's an astrologer, they'll start to know like, okay, well, we're in this one zodiac sign and it's ruled by this one, so like, for instance, right now we're in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So Bitcoin tends to get all of its all-time highs and all of its all-time lows in Sagittarius or Capricorn right in that time. And that is perfectly in alignment with the mythologies. So this could get super complicated, and again, I'd rather get into it maybe in another conversation, and people could check out my work if they want more information about it. But this is how you can just take it and keep expanding and get more and more dialed in to the specifics. So I hope I answered this.
No, you did. You did. I mean, it's fascinating, and I'm trying to get a better grasp on this. What the difference in between the solar cycles, the lunar cycles, what the effects are from a solar eclipse from a lunar eclipse in those cycles,
Yeah. So
etc.
I mean, ultimately, what I need to share is that lunar eclipses are bearish. They're just way more bearish during a lunar phase.
Right.
So they're always bearish though. I mean, full moons are bearish. Like,
So
just the way it is.
from looking at the calendar, it's May 5th and October 26th are the next lunar eclipses. Are they
Yeah,
full lunar
so
eclipses?
by May 5th, we should notice the market is getting rejected and it's going to start to return down again. May 5th is a lunar eclipse, but it's not a
Okay.
total or annual. But this is really a lot easier for people if you just remember full moon bearish, new moon bullish, and then you could compare if we're getting an eclipse on a full moon, well, then it's a lunar eclipse, therefore it's bearish. If we're getting eclipse on a new moon, it's a solar eclipse, therefore it's bullish. It's just kind of, we need to consider that added complexity of the cycle itself, which is a multi-year cycle, and it's dictated by the change of energy by these eclipses. Now, I hope that, well, we've talked about it enough in context to let people know that since May of 2021, we've been in a lunar cycle, and that's going to end moving into April 20th. It gives you an idea of how long that time's been. Now, if you take what I just said and you lay it over the XRP chart, you got your answer. During a lunar phase is pretty much when we're in bear markets. When
That
we're
makes
in a
sense. I
solar
mean,
phase, we're in bull markets. And this is
another
pretty across the board.
another thing too that I just kind of noticed was that with the lunar eclipses that we have coming up in 2023, being that we're entering into a solar cycle, we don't have any total lunar eclipses. It's
Correct.
penumbral and then partial, which is
Yep.
pretty interesting. I don't know if that has anything to do with the fact that we're in a solar cycle. Does that have
It's going to
is there any
have,
correlation to that? Because I'm
that's a
sure
good
there's
question. I mean,
total lunar eclipses that take place in solar cycles, right?
that, yes, absolutely. Next year in 2025, we're going to have a total lunar eclipse in March. Then we're going to have in September a total lunar eclipse. So it's just 2024 is a year where we're seeing that, based off
Okay.
your question that you asked. So yeah, we're going to be seeing total lunar eclipses for sure in 2025. And I think it's really interesting that we get the finality of those eclipses by September. And that's in really good. Wait, well, we were talking about 2023, 2024. Let's look into that because that's obviously the following year. And we won't have any total eclipses in 2024, total lunar eclipses, excuse me. So 2024, in my opinion, is a very good year near the end. But I know that's like in crypto talk, that's like 1,000 years away.
Right, but I mean,
Like
it fits
this is really getting, to the future now.
it fits with cycles, though. I mean, it does fit with cycles from that perspective. But this to come back to the total solar eclipse that we're having on April 20th, this is going to cover the entirety of the United States, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
everywhere
I mean,
this
if people want to know about an eclipse that is really going to be interesting, it's the one in 2024 April eclipse. That one's going to be crazy.
is that the one that's the
Well,
cross
yes,
that's supposed to be a
that's
crossover, like a crossover top of the United States?
exactly, and that's going to be one that is in alignment with the Bitcoin halving. Like, I mean, like you told me before, you got that May calculation, but there's also other Bitcoin calculators that are
Summer of
determining the
next year.
halving. Um, and basically, it's right around that time that we're going to have that eclipse. So, I also have a
Well, this
gem
is
to share with.
estimating. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. This is estimating on this happening chart. I got to pull it up so I can see the May 2nd,
Yeah.
2024. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But then there's another website called buybitcoinworldwide.com, and it determines that it'll happen on March 27th. So they don't know. This is all a prediction model based off of what you just mentioned earlier, which is the timing of it all, the having. And uh, with the 9 minutes versus 11 minutes, like you're going to get deviations every single block. So yeah.
Right. 100%. Sorry. Go
Um,
ahead.
No. It's totally fine. I just think it's interesting to consider what these eclipses do in the world and the significance of them. But I think that eclipse in April of 2024 is going to be there's going to be an event. Like I'm talking 9/11 level event. Going to be some shit. Like I could almost guarantee it.
Well, we're going to be, I would imagine by that time period, we're going to have some heated debates as to who's going to be the Republican and Democratic nominees running for president.
Sure.
So, I mean, when you correspond to a lot of the things that sociologists have done, like the guys who have written The Fourth Turning, I'm not sure. I think we talked about The Fourth Turning briefly.
You brought it up to me last time we talked, I think. It's interesting.
Just all these different things that correlate in a really weird way. And then just looking at astrology, like the Pluto return that took place early last year,
2022. Yep.
So I mean, and how
that was huge.
What took place at that energy in a previous time period that it was in the United States, which was a very revolutionary time period. So that's why I really try to pay attention to a lot of this stuff.
100%. That Pluto's return was so fun to decode because it was right around the time of all those connections with the Platinum Jubilee with the Queen, and the Queen died.
Are lunar and solar eclipses always so close together?
Yeah, typically you see them 14 days apart, like 2 weeks apart.
I've noticed that just by looking at because April 20th and then October 13th or 14th, and then May 5th and October 16th. So that would be kind of like within a 2-week period, roughly.
Yeah, sometimes you have like weird discrepancies. Like I'll give an example in 2024. You have September, there's a lunar eclipse, and then it's followed 2 weeks later by a solar eclipse on October 2nd, and then it's immediately followed by another lunar eclipse on October 17th. Like that's pretty fucking wild. So yeah, 2024 is packed with, it's like its own conversation. But when it comes to us focusing in on this year, yeah, you're going to see it's a very basic year, actually. Just 2 back-to-back solar and lunar eclipses. Nice and simple.
I figured we were going to have, just from my personal opinion, it was going to be a lot of sideways action. There would probably be a few swings up and down, but kind of staying within a range, almost like a crab market versus a bear or a bull, because crabs just kind of go sideways. But I think, I'm obviously looking, because I'm trying to, obviously we can't time these things exactly, but I'm trying to time a Bitcoin price drop to the lowest point that it's going to go as close as I can. And that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to pay attention to a lot of the things that you're mentioning.
Yeah. And then there's the other element of all of this, which is like a black swan. And what I think, if I could give people the black swan date, it's probably going to be April 15th of 2024, around that next that big eclipse, and it's probably going to be something that happens in the United States of America. But I have
there's tax day. Is the 15th tax day?
Yeah, well, it's the day that the Titanic sank. It's the date of the Notre Dame fire. It's the date of the Boston bombing, Boston Marathon bombing. Also, remember 2021, Bitcoin hit the all-time high on April 14th, and then it went lower following that date, literally on the 15th, the next day. So yeah, there's a lot to say about April 15th. It's a date. Back during the. I won't even say that because that's like a censor-worthy thing, but my point is that April 15th is profound, really important date. And one of the things that I'll share it here on your channel. I haven't brought it up on my channel yet because it's a very new thing that I decoded. But the way that I've determined what we're going to expect on the April 15th date is all about the day of the week that it lands on. So the one thing that the Titanic, the Boston Marathon bombing, and the Notre Dame fire all have in common is the April 15th landed on a Monday.
That's right. Okay.
So in 2024, April 15th lands on a Monday. So that's another piece of evidence that goes like along with my thesis that, yeah, we're going to have an event probably on that date. And it's typically negative. Like it's not a positive. This isn't a good thing. This is it'll be a ritual something that'll sustain in its narrative. You know, it'll be an event that'll really, really take a lot of energy out of the world, and it'll be a talking point for a while. Now, it's never as important as something that happens around a Shemitah year or around specifically September or October.
Well,
That's
I
our
mean,
biggest events. Our biggest events happen then. If we're talking through the lenses of people who are interested in finances, it's the September, October, November timeframe of the 7-year cycle. And that was no different this year, man. If you compare markets around that time, it's obvious. You know, we could have predicted a long time ago that by September through October, November of 2022, that the market would be down.
yeah, no, I kind of wish I would have known you back then. I would have been beneficial, because I definitely feel like it's given me a better understanding on some of this stuff. So we're going to be entering into a solar cycle on April 20th.
Yep.
We talked about the next eclipse on May 5th. Then we have another solar eclipse taking place on October the 13th. And that's also a Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
Right?
Yep.
So Friday the 13th, is that I don't know if you like the language, do you use positive, negative? Is it a positive day, a negative day? What is Friday the 13th effect on the markets is pretty negative?
Yeah. I mean, there's been multiple market crashes on Friday the 13th.
But how does that work if the Friday the 13th is on a solar eclipse in a solar cycle? Does that lessen the effect of the Friday the 13th negativity?
Well, that's a really good question, but I think it's under the context of like it'll start coming back to the context of trend, like where we're at in the phase of the market by then. Like I've already kind of gone into this idea that after 1 year of the Shemitah, so that'll be September, October timeframe, is when we anticipate bottoms to come in. But just because we have a solar eclipse doesn't necessarily mean that it's always moving. It doesn't move up necessarily.
Okay.
And it's just we have to consider it in context of so many other moving parts. I know that's not the answer that people want, probably. Like people want a definitive, you know, this is what's gonna happen. But
well, I can't
here's the
think
thing:
that it's a definitive science.
yeah, of course. I know. It's just sometimes it gets convoluted and it's difficult to answer specific questions like that. But you are right. Like theoretically, we shouldn't be, but how I like to look at it is Friday the 13th has a pattern. You know, it has a pattern in markets. And if I'm aware of that pattern, just like I exposed before on April 15th, then I should probably consider that. You know, look at the recent lunar eclipse that happened. It happened on the 8th, but we saw the FTX thing really happen on the 9th. And if you look at what November 9th is in reverse, it's 9/11. If you look at the day that John Lennon died on an 11/9 date numerology. When you look at the date numerology with a specific way that I like to do it with double digits, he if you add it up, it was 119, and he died on the day that left 343 days left in the year. And one of the most popular numbers you see with 9/11 was 343 firefighters died that day. What's 343? It's 7 times 7 times 7. That's the jackpot number. This all happened during a Shemitah year. I mean, it's coincidence, maybe, or yeah, it's maybe coincidence, or is it actually just part of like this charade of life that we all watch, you know? So when we see celebrity deaths or we see big events happen in the world, I mean, for me, it's very quick. I just hop into my decoding mode and I'm figuring it out real fast. I mean, Tupac died. Tupac died on Rosh Hashanah on a Friday the 13th.
What is the significance of Tupac dying on a Rosh Hashanah on Friday the 13th, though?
His last album that he was going to come out with was called Killuminati. He
like
clearly
he was
wasn't
exposing something.
He clearly wasn't killed on accident. It's a ritual murder, like they all are.
I would wonder where the Gematria fits in with the release of his album under the Machiavelli name. Machiavelli.
Yep.
which I
Yeah, I
guess was
mean,
an
I've
artist who faked his death or something to that effect. Isn't that
I
what
haven't
Machiavelli did?
I think you're right about that. I haven't fully started getting into the decode behind him, but I start to notice that there's these connections between dates of significant players in our world. You know, the dates around Kobe's death, Michael Jackson, Kurt Cobain. You know, we have that 27 Club with Janis Joplin and Kurt Cobain as well. Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse. There's a lot of people. They're all dying at this one particular I believe what's his name? Mac Miller died same age as Tupac. I mean, I'm not entirely sure why it's all going down the way it is, but when you start to decode it, look at some of these significant date numerologies connecting to their birthdays and the day of death, you know, there is an aspect of it that almost doesn't seem human. It's like, how could a human organize such a thing? The same way that how could a human organize Bitcoin to hit an all-time high on a new moon every time? That's where it becomes borderline. I'll give another example. The crash that we saw on March 12th of 2020, where Bitcoin made a significant move to the downside, that was the 72nd day of the year. Okay. And why this matters, why this really matters so much is Bitcoin in basic Gematria, which is ABC equals 123, Bitcoin equals 72. I
And
mean,
70,
fasten
72
seven
significance, 7
because
and 2, 9.
it was the 72nd day of the year was March 12th, 2020, and Bitcoin dropped 40% in a single day. It was one of the biggest single day crashes in Bitcoin history at the time, if not the biggest single day crash. It was also the biggest crash in markets in history if you start looking at just the money side of it, like the actual amount of market cap. So think about this, the 72nd day of the year, and money in Gematria equals 72. And this was market ritual. And then this led to Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th was that bottom that we spoke on earlier. The following day, that was the day that Bill Gates stepped down from being CEO of Microsoft. And then he entered this whole, different endeavor of philanthropy.
You know,
Which is
I would love to see even someone like yourself take and go through the charts on a daily wick for Bitcoin specifically, or whatever the case might be, and just like say like when there was a full moon, when there was a lunar eclipse, when there was a solar eclipse, and just the different things that had taken place where you can actually like I like looking at these things. It'd be really
Yep,
nice to be able to like see like a timeline, looking
totally.
at it, like looking at a chart. Like if I look at the Federal Reserve, how the dollar has been devalued, and you look at it, they could tell you on this date is the Bretton Woods Agreement. On this date was the Nixon shock. So I'd love to see a
Totally.
breakdown and see all those corresponding things to learn
Yeah,
almost
brother.
everything that you can from the very first Bitcoin chart and how it corresponds. I think that'd be fascinating.
That's pretty much what my Patreon's all about. Like I make decodes all the time where I'm showing these like 144-day cycle and like why do we have this one pivot to this pivot? That's quite often what I do when I make Patreon content outside of my weekly podcast. So I
Okay.
hyper focus specifically on like a concept of a pattern that I've located, and I expose the pattern with the chart, and I start getting into the perhaps the reasons why, outside of just the basic TA perspective, something that's more the esoteric perspective.
Which I appreciate. I think this might be a good place for us to wrap up. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to highlight or anything to that effect before we do wrap up?
No, man, I think we really nailed down a lot of the importance behind this upcoming eclipse and how to anticipate the year, which you called it like a crab year. And I'm kind of looking at it very similarly. Like, I think we will have a relief rally. We could be potentially seeing 200 to 400% gains for Bitcoin and some of these other coins, but I do not think it's going to go into a new cycle high. I think we're going to see it come right back down. It's just an accumulation year, you know, and I know that's like not what everyone loves to hear, but it's what you wish you heard back in 2018. because back in
Right.
2018, when we started rallying up into the summer of 2019, I guarantee you all the YouTubers and all the people were coming out saying, we're recovering, we're going to keep going, we're going to go to 30K right now. And nope, went right back down. And then you had the crash in the pandemic and we went right back to 3K. And that shit could have all been predictable if you just got out of your emotions and prepared yourself for like, just to be more dialed into a sophisticated investment thesis. And that
Yeah.
requires you to take the emotions out of play. So we went over so many things, got into the data. We were clearly delineating the opinion versus the facts and the charts. And that's probably the best place to end,
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I definitely enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to be paying attention to what's happening, and I definitely want to get you back on sometime before, obviously, April for a crypto conversation. But I definitely want to get you on sooner than later for a non-crypto conversation that we could do over on Rice TVX. Again, I'm going to have links down below for the playlist that's going to have all of the conversations that Jordan has done here on Rice TVX, the two previous, including this one. So this is the third conversation together. I'll have links for his YouTube channel, for his website, and for his Patreon. Before we wrap up, you got any final thoughts or anything that you want to add in regards to what you do for people that may want to come check out what you're offering, whether on your website, whether your YouTube channel or your Patreon?
Yeah, so I do actually have 3 new decodes coming out. One will be on the Chinese New Year, which is another, really important aspect to everything that we talked about today. So over on my Patreon, patreon.com/watersabove, I'll be releasing the Chinese New Year decode very soon. It is packed full of information. It's going to be a really long presentation. Just so much information will be in there. And then I will have a shorter decode coming out about the Super Bowl, because I know a lot of people are interested in that since I decoded the last Super Bowl. And I'm also going to be getting into a decode that's about the book of Genesis for people that are more interested in that, So I kind of kicking off the new year with hitting every angle, everything from Gematria sports to the market with the Chinese New Year and that influence, as well as theology. And that's really where I want to take this new year, to kind of just push as much decoding gnosis out there and get people to become better decoders themselves.
I love it, man. And it was when we were talking privately before we started recording that you mentioned the Genesis decode that really sparked me wanting to take the conversation beyond crypto. I mean, I know that we could definitely have some awesome conversations that don't include Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I'm definitely looking forward to those. But I do enjoy these, man, and I do appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. And I'm excited to jump on your other channel and maybe get into some things outside of the conversation we had today, because I know there's so much that we could get into with that.
And then I do at some point want to try, like, especially when we have, because I don't know how this year is going to be, but I definitely would like to get your take on how you're comparing different cryptocurrencies to, from what I'm starting to understand, you're comparing them to historical, or not historical, mythological. What would you call them? People, mythological, and creations,
Yeah, just like
like
these,
where.
these deities that are brought up, and I think a good way of explaining it is you start to see symbolism and repeating symbolism in everything of the big, like one example that's tangible for people. You see with the World Health Organization and anything that's tied to health and wellness and the pharmaceutical industry, everything regarding that has this symbol of the staff with the 2 serpents around it, the caduceus. Okay. What's the caduceus tied to? It's tied to Hermes or Mercury. So this is mercurial kind of like symbolism. And when you start to decode our reality, you'll see that, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense why they use that symbolism. And it's not hidden, actually. It's not actually esoteric. It's right there in the logos, right in front of your face. If you look at all of the symbols regarding government in the United States of America, whether that's your Federal Reserve System or you bring it down to smaller, more compartmentalized organizations, you're going to see the eagle, the bald eagle. What's that a symbol of? That's the symbol of Jupiter. And that actually is directly a connection to Mercury as well, but that's getting a little bit more complex. So I'm just trying to reveal to people that these symbols and these logos, they're all tied back to Greek and Roman mythology. Everything about your court system is tied back to Saturn. When you look at the priests wearing the all black and the white collar, and you see the judges wearing the all black and this is all Saturn symbology. So I want people to see it for what it is, which is that it's all tied back to the mythological deities, and I don't see a difference in markets. So if I'm able to identify a pattern in the logo and the color scheme and any of that regarding a stock or a cryptocurrency, the pattern I could decode further and get into the letters, the numbers, and it starts to make so much more sense from that angle. And it's helped me substantially to be able to determine like what I should give my attention to and what I should disregard, you know?
Awesome.
And I think that's ultimately what people could walk away from, just some utility of it all. And it's not my opinion at the end of the day, because you could just take a logo and you could go do your research afterwards on your own. You know, I'm not trying to convince anyone. You could all do the research on your own, and there's something to actually pin it back to. It's not just an opinion.
No, it's fascinating when you kind of do that. I mean, I've seen a lot of like where people have taken just modern logos for like Facebook, just different companies that we see every day, and what the meanings are behind the logos, because there is that power of symbology 100%.
Yes.
And
Being
whether
able to
it's known
reprogram
or
your
unknown.
subconscious.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%, man. So
Yeah,
thank you
there's a
again for your
reason
time.
why there's a reason why McDonald's uses the colors they use. There's a reason why, you know, Netflix uses the colors they use. Like it's obvious. But yeah, we could talk about that another time for sure, maybe on your other channel.
100%. Well, thank you again, man. I really appreciate your time. And for everybody who's watching, if you guys are not already subscribed over on Jordan's channel, Waters Above, I definitely encourage you to do so. Check out the link, check out his Patreon channel, and check out his courses. Everything will be linked down below for everything that we talked about today. And to wrap up, I do encourage you to make sure that you are subscribed here at Rice TVX and Rice Against the Grain. Follow me on Rumble and Odyssey. And I encourage you to treat people how you want to be treated. Be a blessing to others. Be the glitch you want to see in the matrix. Be the change you want to see in the world. And until next time, practice change.